Cool. Ready to
Cool.
go?
Yeah. Welcome everyone. Really excited to be joined by Alex, who is going to be talking us through some fundamentals of low code, what it is, how you can start using it, and powering up your no code projects and skill sets. So I think we're going to have a workshop today, and then maybe some questions along the way. So I shall pass it on to Alex to take it from here. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
Can you see pitch? A lot of yellow.
Yes.
Yes.
A lot of yellow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So welcome everyone on this workshop on low code. So introduction to low code. My name is Alex. Wait. Can I skip slides? Yeah, there we go. Nice to meet you. So I am the founder of an agency called 9x that uses no code and low code to build custom applications for companies. And I also created a course on low code called Low Code Starter Pack, which is a course that takes around roughly 20 hours to complete. And that should help you kickstart your journey as a low coder. So what you're going to see in the next slides are the introduction to the course. And then we're not going to go through the whole course because it lasts 20 hours, right? But I'm going to give you an overview of what, if you want to get started, what you should look at and what you can safely ignore. So agenda, we'll go through a short introduction. So what is low code? And then we'll dive right into tips and tricks to leverage low code tools. And I'll try to answer 3 questions. So which languages should you learn? Because there are tons of technologies, frameworks, languages to learn. Which one should you pick? Then which tools can you use for low code? And finally, I'm going to try as soon as possible to dive into use cases to show you the cool things you can do and try to leave some time also for a Q&A. All right, so what is low code? So brief definition. Our definition, when we tried to do the course, it was a bit difficult to get to a common definition if you look online, because low code in the enterprise space is a mix with no code. Our definition is that you're going to have tools on one hand that you use, so SaaS or no code tools, and you're going to add a little bit of code to build custom functionalities that those tools don't offer yet. And why you want to do that? So if we map out what you use every day, you have more or less 3 options. You have SaaS applications, no code applications, you have code. SaaS is the simplest option you have. No code is a bit in the middle and it allows you to do a bit more stuff. And then code is low level, but it's very complex. And so if you use low code, it's going to help you extend the possibilities of the tools that you're using. And so that's fairly interesting to learn. And that's why if you're able to write a little bit of code, you're going to be able to do a lot of cool stuff with the no code tools that you use. So then the question is, what do you need to know? If you take what it takes for a developer to become proficient, it takes years. You have to learn lots of frameworks, different languages, how to build applications. A website is a fairly complex matter if you start from scratch. But the good news is that on the other hand, if you want to start in low code, there's only a fraction of that you need to know. And so the only problem that is left is nobody's going to tell you what you should learn. All the documentation you have online is for developers, right? There's not really a huge population of low coders, not yet. And some of the documentation online is going to be useful. Just don't know which one. And so that's what we're going to cover in this workshop. We're going to try to give you bird's eye view of, if you are getting started, where do you need to look first, so to speak. So far, so good?
Yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah, really useful. Keep going.
Cool. So the question, so which languages should you learn? First? And I would suggest that you look at these first. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and as a bonus, if you want, SQL. And so the reason for the first three is simple. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's all that the web browser that you're using knows. So when a page loads in your browser, the structure of the page is HTML, the cosmetics are CSS, and logic, the intelligence, the interactions, everything is dynamic is JavaScript. There is nothing else. There is no Python, no Ruby. Like those are things that happen in the background, but like what your browser understands and reads and transcripts as a web page comes only for those three. And so knowing how to tweak a little bit of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript becomes very useful. And so I'm going to give you an example. I don't know how far you go in the course, Max. Do you inspect pages sometimes with DevTools, or is it something?
No, definitely not. Really don't go
Okay.
that far. Yeah, at all.
Okay. So like if you're using Chrome, like it's available in any web browser, like Chrome, it's there. It's called Inspector or Chrome DevTools. On any web page from your browser, you can click Inspect. And then this is going to open, oh no, so much code, and we don't know what it is. Well, actually, even though that looks a little bit, well, it's not meant to be read by humans, right? But there is a way to understand the structure, because the structure of a page, it's all in HTML. And so being able, for instance, to navigate in the structure of a web page is something that if you do 1 hour introduction to HTML, you're going to be able to understand which part of the page you are interacting with, and what is this part of the code responsible for. That's one thing. The second thing is regarding CSS. Every element that is on this page, there's not much, but if you look at this on the top, for instance, well, if I click on it, it's going to show me the corresponding HTML, and it's also going to show me the CSS of this element. And so there are some tools where, and that's the advantage of no-code tools, is you don't need to know CSS to change how things look like. But there might be some situation where your fallback solution only fallback solution is CSS. And so being able to change CSS properties is something like it takes maybe half an hour to learn. But then it's super useful because you won't be stuck in case that's your only option. And then the third part, which we don't see here, so we have HTML and CSS, is more the logic, which is handled by JavaScript. And here there are more advanced things I can show later in the use cases, but JavaScript is really what can help you push the boundaries of the tools that you are using. And yes, JavaScript is complicated. If you want to be a JavaScript developer, it's definitely not going to fit in a few hours. But I guarantee you that in less than 10 hours, if you cover the basics of JavaScript, you can already do pretty good stuff. And the last one that we also added in the course, which is I think quite it's for a different use case, but if like me, you come from the business world and you have to deal with data for quite some time. For a long time, I was dependent on a BI team to provide me data that I would then analyze in Excel. And you can learn SQL. You can learn the basics of SQL, which is the language the most popular language to databases. You can learn enough in an afternoon to query data by yourself. And like if you're in this where you have to write SQL to get data, you don't even need my course. Like, you go to any web page that is providing like intro to SQL, where it's like roughly, I don't know, half an hour of introduction, get the most basic queries. You will learn it in this fast, and you'll never go back afterwards, because then you can do things on your own. So these languages first, and next, so this would be the first 10 hours. The next 10 hours, you should spend looking at these topics. And of course, there are, especially APIs, you won't know everything about APIs, even in 10 hours. But knowing the basics of how an API is called, what are the different components of an API call, what are the different types of API requests, is super useful. And getting started is not this complicated. There are APIs that are super complex. So if you want to try something with Stripe, it's probably not where you should start. But there are APIs that don't require any parameter, don't have any security, like authentications, for instance, something that's quite complex if you are doing it for the first time. But there are APIs that don't require authentication, and you can do an API call on your own relatively easy. So this is one topic that you should look into. Next to it is webhooks that you should also know, because APIs and webhooks are both sides of the same coin. One is made to receive data from a system. The other one is to push data to another system. If you have basic knowledge of these two, you are able to build, like, ever had the situation where there's an Integromat or Zapier integration that's missing? Well, then you're able to build that missing integration. And it won't take you a day, it will take you maybe an hour to figure it out, but then you don't have to wait for Integromat or Zapier to build the functionality that's missing. And then the last things, which are more advanced topic, and I came to like discover a bit lately, but that are really useful, are fetch and events. So fetch is how you will call APIs, is the function you would use to call APIs in JavaScript. And it requires some practice, but you could get actually in the use case, I will show you there we use fetch a bit quite often, so you will see it. And then the last piece, which is maybe the most advanced, but then if you want to make changes on the front end, that's the only part that's a bit more advanced that you should invest time. I would invest time in our JavaScript events, which are all the events happening when you are interacting in the browser. So how can you build additional functionality if the user is clicking on this button, or if the user is scrolling down this section or hovering this element? This is all managed through events. It's close already to beginning of programming, but the basics, again, like all of that combined, you should be able to cover in 10 hours and get the basics. Are there any questions before I switch to tools?
I can't see any in the chat, but feel free to come off mute if you have any questions, guys. All good, I think. Yeah, all good.
Nice. Let's switch back to full screen. I didn't notice. So tools, which tools? Already mentioned, like the part of code or the beginning of codes that you should learn. Which tools can you work with? So the basic rule of thumb is, if it has an API, if it supports webhooks, or if it allows you to write custom code, such as Webflow or Bubble, then you can do low-code stuff with it. And there's a reason, and you will find it often in no-code tools, and that's really good news. And the reason is no-code tools are not going to be able to build all the functionality you need. But at least, since the people are using them are already quite, they figure things out by themselves. Let's put it that way. You have a community like 100 days of no code. There's a lot of people online are trying to figure out how to do cool stuff with no code. And so for these makers, the vendors of no code tools, it's almost always a no-brainer to give this option to trigger webhooks and extend some functionality, or write some custom code like Webflow allows it, if what their tool offers doesn't cover without code. So anything that has an API, webhooks, and custom code should work. There's one tool, this like my personal favorite. If you are using it, so Airtable, if you're using it and you are not writing scripts, you're really missing out. Because this is, I will show you in the examples, but you get so much more functionality out of Airtable with their scripts and their automations. Where in both cases you can write JavaScript scripts and basically do whatever you need that is not yet an app in Airtable. Then another one that's very very useful and that you can push with low code is Integral Math, which you probably already know as a tool. But there are 3 modules that if you know a little bit of code, you're going to be able to do much more advanced stuff. These modules are webhooks, the PostgreSQL module, and the third one is HTTP request. Because those, I'm not sure. So maybe some of you are already using those without code, and it's possible. But for instance, HTTP requests, you need to have a sound understanding of APIs and how to interact with. And you use this module when Integral Math hasn't built yet the integration with a given tool. Yet the tool, on the other hand, as an API you could interact with, and so you are creating this integration from scratch. And then those last two, so I already talked about this one. This is the logo of Chrome DevTools. This is the tool I showed at the beginning, which allows you to do multiple things. So this is a tool that developers use to debug stuff, so inspecting things in the page. And Postman, which is a very cool free tool to make test API requests. And so when you are going to work with an API, you don't want to write all the code just to figure out that the data that you are looking for is not really what you want. You want to look at the documentation, but then the second thing you want to do is testing, making test API calls, getting back the data, and then figuring out whether you work with this data or you have to look for a different API. All right, enough talk, or at least enough slides. Now I want to show you some use cases. So I have 5 examples. Starting with, I think the most obvious. I think this is really how also a lot of people get into low code in the first place. Scraping. So context: you have a website that is a repository of things you find interesting. So for instance, you go on Twitter and you want to track interesting people, not on a Twitter list, you want to store them in a database and then do something else with it. If you don't automate this process, then it's going to be very manual. If you have, so this is an example. This one, like maybe the simplest case of low code. So you have to write a little bit of code for this. But not so much. So let's say I want to save Mac's profile to my Airtable base. I have this little extension called Airtable Web Clipper. And this is something I configured. Whenever I'm on Twitter, if I have a contact that's interesting, I'm just going to click Add Twitter Contact. It's going to parse to extract the relevant information. So there's the URL. Profile picture, the bio, the website, and the location. And I just press add record, and then we can look into the base and see that Max has been added here. I'm going to do it in parallel on LinkedIn, just to have 2 examples, just to show you that basically you can do it on any website. The only thing that it needs is, it's not obviously Airtable doesn't offer you a web clipper for Twitter and then a web clipper for LinkedIn. You have to configure this. So if, for instance, I take this person, which is a French minister, so why not? And I want to save him. I have this other clipper, add LinkedIn contact, and this works. So it's a bit different, differently configured for compared to the other site. And so basically, what do you need to do to configure a web clipper for any website? If we go to our base, so web clipper is an app from Airtable. Here I have the different web clippers I have defined. All you need to do is how to access the elements in the page. So for instance, again, I have to open the inspector where I'm going to inspect the page. And I need to find a way in code to tell my web clipper, hey, I want every time you go to a page like this one on LinkedIn, I want you to take the image, and then there are a bunch of properties that you can use to specify, I want this image, I don't want that image. Yeah, the way the page is structured can be via CSS properties or the position in the HTML code. There are different ways to do that. And you specify that, and then you have a way to scrape elements on a page. We're just looking at what we had for Twitter. This is where you will configure. So there are some things, the URL is straightforward and you don't need code. But for instance, to get max picture, we had to write this and specify that this is a div element with this these classes. And these arrows that you see here are things that where I'm specifying I want to access this element that is inside this other element, etc., etc., until I get to the exact selection element. Like writing this probably takes maybe, I don't know, depending on the difficulty. There are pages that are more or less difficult, but this should take 20 minutes, 10 minutes if you're used to that. So that's for the easy one. Now there's the advanced part. And so I'm going to show you so it's the same principle. Is going to a website that always has the same structure, extracting information, logging it in Airtable. Except here, this is a tool that the agency 9x that we built for a client. So that's an Airtable base. And the way it works, it scrapes contacts and companies from a social network called Xing. I'll show you. Actually, I will show you the URL once we go through the logic. So the way it works is you specify so you create a new batch, you create a new record. And in this batch, we're going to specify what we look for. And so we're looking in that case for companies that are in Germany, in those states, that have number of employees specified. So it should be around, it's more than 200 employees or something like this. Yeah, so between 50 employees and 5,000 employees, and from that industry. Entering these parameters in Airtable, this concatenates, creates a URL. So this creates the URL of that we're going to scrape, basically. So I don't need to go to the page and click scrape. And then it's going to extract all companies until it's done. So the 301 companies that we have here. And then in the second phase, we've also built a logic that is then looking for the people working in those companies that have a corresponding job title. So the job titles, some of them are in German, because it's for a German company. But basically, you get the logic. The only thing you need to do with this app is select your criteria. Here, you search criteria. Click scrape company, then you wait maybe half an hour, so that all the companies are there. Then you go back to the tool, you hit scrape people, and then you'll get your list of corresponding contacts at the end of the day. So you can see right now it's currently working. And once this will get 100%, we'll have all the people extracted for this batch. So a little bit more advanced. This took us. This is definitely not for beginners. This took us a month to build. We use integral match, Airtable, and a parsing tool called ParseHub. We show in the course how to do a simple version of that for those who want to do it. But the first case, the scraper with the clipper, this is something you can learn to do in an afternoon.
Alex, I've got a question on what, when you said concatenate, what does that mean?
Sure. Sure. So basically, the way it's built, if you want to go a bit more into detail, is every element here that we select for the end user, we thought it would be more convenient to show real search criteria, like you want to add a location, but it's going to be somewhere from Germany. When you enter those search criteria in the social network in Xing, what you see here, so every time if I remove one parameter here, it's going to shorten the URL, and all those criteria are going to be added up. So the URL is going to be longer, longer, and longer. I'm not sure. This is actually, maybe it's called concatenation now, in that case. But so basically, like every time we change parameters in the scraper, we're just making changes for the UI for the user. It looks like you are entering settings, and it looks like an app. The only thing we're doing is we're changing this URL, which when you visit it matches exactly the criteria you have there. And so one intermediary step we have here is that for those parameters, we had to go, so something like, for instance, if I change the size, the different size parameters of the companies, this is the record that I see, that I select in my batch. But what actually is inserted in the URL, I think, is much different. Find it. Is it a code? Exactly. This is just this code, size code. And for the location, I think the codes are a bit different. The location codes are a bit different. So basically, this gets injected in the URL. But in order to make it a bit more user-friendly, because I will not remember what's the location code of Bremen every time, we created this sort of like UX that's a bit more easy to understand.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for clearing that up, Alex.
Cool. So that's for scraping. This is easy, this is the advanced, and there are lots of cases in between. It doesn't have to be this complicated. We did it for a company that needs to generate a lot of leads, get a lot of new contacts all the time. So these were the constraints. You can build something in the middle in a day or two. If it's your first time, it will take a bit more time, but it's actually not impossible to pull this off. The next use case, which is maybe the most common, and this is where you should start actually, is manipulating data. So here I give you an example from, it's a script inside Airtable. I will run scripts in Airtable in the next use cases. This one I just want to illustrate that it's not that complicated. So what does the script do? It's actually in the same tool. When we receive the data, when we extract phone numbers, they look like this. And unfortunately, the CRM of this company is only accepting phone numbers that are under this format, because if afterwards we call and the phone number is formatted this way, we're not going to recognize that we called this number. So it's going to create duplicates and all sorts of problems. So we needed to clean up the form. So we needed to have an input that looks like this, where you have spaces, dashes, slashes, parentheses, turn into no space between the numbers. And so the script to do that, you can ignore what's here at the beginning. When you write scripts in Airtable, you always have to declare a lot of things at the beginning. And this is basically stating what things are. The code to manipulate, like change this piece of text into this, is those 3 lines of code. And you can maybe guess when you look at the function that we use there. We're just chaining the same replace function. So every time the code is actually not very sophisticated. Dot replace, if you find this set of characters, replace it with nothing. If you find this set of characters, replace it with nothing. Same here, same there. Here it's a little bit more advanced. We're using a regular expression. So instead of saying if you find one set of character, we're saying if you find any of these, if you find a slash, curly square brackets, dash, comma, parentheses, and so on. Any of these replace with nothing. That's the whole code. And so this one case, if you need to clean up data in spreadsheets or in Airtable, it's fairly easy with dot replace or dot split, which are like JavaScript functions you can apply to things to get to your outcome and fully automate it. The other use case, fairly common, is if you want to do calculation. But of course, in Airtable, for instance, you have formula fields. If you're already comfortable with those, don't write JavaScript to do that. But there are some cases where you won't be able to make the calculation exactly where you want them with formula fields, and this is where you can use JavaScript instead. All right, next, something really cool I want to show you. Actually, it's an app that's not really that's not live yet. So as an agency, we want to offer an app for our clients, so they can book missions with us. They can see the missions they had with us and think about their tool stack. And so we started building it. The app is built in Webflow, and this is where we make use of JavaScript events. So here you have the Webflow project. I need to, it's not really the page I want to show. This one. Okay, so that's the skeleton of our app in Webflow. So there's not much happening in the middle. We have the sidebar where you can navigate, just this, but like everything else is hidden. However, when I log in as me, the user, as Alex, it's going to be a little bit different. And then I'm going to explain what we did. I need to know which account. Yes. All right. So pretty cool. Instead, I have, so first is my name, which is pretty cool. And you have these cards. And those cards, they come from a backend it's a no-code backend that we're using. It's called Xano, which is like a bit more advanced solution, but pretty cool. And so all these elements here, we got them via API, an API call to this backend. But how do you do it in Webflow? Custom code. And so custom code is something that if you want to display dynamic content in Webflow, this is one way you could do it. If you want to show me content that is specific to me, this is one setup that you could create. Just to show you how this looks like. So if you want to write custom code, you go to a page settings. Then you're going to scroll down there. And then you can write code in the header, in the head tag, or in the body tag. And so this is what we wrote. And so I will skip all the details, but basically all we do is three functions. We declare three functions that at the end of our code we execute. The first function is called get home data. And so get home data is calling, the information of me, the user. And so what you see here, Alex has these missions that are associated to him. He has these tools that are associated to him. And if Max has a different account, it will retrieve different information, and you will get a completely different view in the app. So we have one part, which is doing one API call to the backend using fetch that I mentioned. And so, yes, obviously, this is not something, if the first time you have to write this, it's not so easy. But like a little bit of repetition, and it's not that complicated. And like the practice makes perfect there, but I think definitely it's feasible to learn it in a short amount of time. The second function that we have, actually, we have one function for these and one function for those. Basically, what it does is those cards are actually there. We're just hiding it at the beginning in Webflow. And then this is using JavaScript. What we do is we make them appear. So you have a way to make elements appear or disappear. Actually, in Webflow, also you have a way to make elements appear or disappear by changing the state of an element to hidden. If I do this, I'm hiding the element. Well, you can do it with JavaScript as well. And so what we're saying is get me the information relevant to Alex, which cards he has for his projects, his mission, and his stack. And then make the card appear and then inject the information inside each card until there is no more card to create because you went through all this data. And so back to the code briefly. So we saw the API call. It's 15 lines of code, 20 lines of code. Building cards, the second function, it's another 25, 30. And it's literally saying, grab this element, make it appear, clone it as much time as you need, inject the data in it. And actually, this is already, this one, the second function and the third one, we write exactly the same code. So it's already something that's repeated. All right, so maybe a bit advanced. Do you have any questions on this one? I'm curious actually to know if there are some of you that do stuff in the front end that use Webflow, Card, or Bubble that have ideas in this area and that like more or less the same way, and that I want to know how to do it.
Yeah, I've got a question, and thank you so much, Alexandre, as well, for giving us a really good detailed demo. What are like some of the common use cases you've seen in your experience for why people would want to scrape data and like how they would use it? I know you've mentioned some good examples as well, but just in case some of us are not really thinking about just the power of this, like what are some common examples of how you've seen it used?
Yeah. So if there's no API, if you're looking for specific information but there's no API for that, well, scraping is your option. If you want to monitor our website, for instance, let's say Max wants to look at every new project that's on MakerPad and wants to engage with people there. He has the option to go to MakerPad every day, like scroll for until he's done with everything that's new, and then maybe log it in the base or engage directly with people. He could do that. He could also like build a small scraper that monitors the website, gets the new incoming stuff, categorizes them in the stuff that he specified are already interesting, and then act on the top five that are most relevant for him. The other use case, very common, so that we did a lot of scraping for as the agency, is lead gen. Lead gen in B2B, this is like, you know where your customers are. They are all on this website. This website is not does not share their data, or they're not going to provide you a CSV of all the information. Plus, it always changes, right? So on a monthly basis, scrape it, see what changed, see who you need to contact, and so on and so forth. I think in general, every business that like B2B businesses that want to start reaching out to a lot of people end up either buying databases, or you can scrape. Sometimes it's also more relevant.
Okay, thank you so much.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, the only other question I was going to ask is some like a tool like Slack, because I can imagine there's a lot of customers and a lot of big audiences in Slack. Like, do you find that Slack already has native tools to do this kind of thing, or would we need to use like some of these methods that you?
So you're interested in building stuff on Slack?
Scrape, like if you wanted to scrape content in Slack, would you need like?
Wow, good question. So like one thing that's tricky with scrapers, like there are tons of companies doing scraping on LinkedIn. Yeah, and basically, if you look at how they sell themselves, they're like, we won't be kicked out, guaranteed. Once your data becomes really valuable, then you start investing in IT security, and then it's a battle like who's the smartest. For Slack, actually, so the one constraint is you need to log in. So I would do it on Slack web, not Slack desktop, desktop app. And on Slack web, like for instance, with a tool like ParseHub, you can tell ParseHub, go to Slack web, log in with my credentials. Then once you're in, you can start scraping. So there are tools that handle this logic. It's not necessarily low code. What would be like, you could do this manually with ParseHub. Where you could automate that is the thing that we built is basically we're telling ParseHub to go to this URL or go do this for me. I don't have to manually reactivate it every second day or every half day, and it can run nonstop. That's the benefit you would get. I think it really depends on the size of the database that you're trying to extract. If it's a one-off job, I would use ParseHub. They have a free tier that's really good, and it's free. Sorry, they have a free tier that's really good, and you can extract, I think, up to 200 pages an hour. I think that's the limit. So it's really like, unless you want to extract all of LinkedIn, yeah, you should be good to go with that.
Thank you.
Cool. I have two more to show you. And so the point I was making on learning webhooks and APIs. So you can connect apps together. So we're gonna jump into Airtable finally. It's been a while. Right. And so let's say, like I have prepared this in this automation in Airtable. So whenever a record is created in there, let's say I want to push the data of these records to another application. And so the way you can push data from one application to another, if you don't have any integration, is to use webhooks. And so for that, we need to write a little bit of code. Which can you see properly? Can you read the code, or it's too small?
Yeah, it's coming through okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So basically, we have our webhook integral map, the URL of our webhook. If I go back to the slide we have here, the idea is I have something happening in Airtable, and this is where my information is. I'm going to use a webhook to pass whatever information from a given record, for instance, and to push it to integral map. And so in order to do that, so in Airtable, when you are doing automations, you need to, in scripts, if you want to take information from a record, you're going to write these things first, which are basically like you are specifying what cells of the record you want to grab. So here I grabbed name, bio, and location. So I should get bio, location, and name in those variables. And then I have the URL of the webhook I want to trigger. Here I specify the data I want to push to Integromat. So I want to push the name, the bio, and location. And so if this works, the webhook should receive in what we call the payload. It should receive those 3 variables with the content of one record. And then we use fetch. And so fetch is really like, it's a way to trigger API calls or call URLs. And of course, like there's a little bit of code there. So if you're not familiar with these, might seem a little bit like overwhelming, but I would see the other way around. It's not that much. Like we write like in 20 lines of code, we could manage to push data from one application to another. You could perfectly learn that. So we're going to test it. I need to open Integromat just to showcase. Where am I? Okay, that's the one. Webhook tester. Okay, I'm going to create one from scratch because I'm not sure which one this is. So this is how you would do it. You need to create a new scenario. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to trigger this scenario from a webhook. Actually, it's a good thing we can see that it's fast. So the only thing that I'm going to do, like then what happens afterwards, you can define it with in your automation, and you don't need code for that. You're going to create a custom webhook. And as you can see, we use these a lot. Actually, it's still there. So when you create a webhook, it's going to create a unique URL that you can then call. And so if I run this once, this is ready to receive a call. And so if, for instance, I can do it from the browser at first. If you want to call a webhook without anything, any Airtable or whatever, you can also do this. I call the webhook, then Integromat received here the call I just made. Which is one way. Like you could already just use in your script await fetch the webhook URL, and then it triggers your scenario. What I want to show you, it's a bit more interesting, is you can also pass data, which basically you build an integration, like custom integration you need. So in order for that, I need to run once again. And now instead, I'm going to test the script. So the first step, I want to test again. Need to make sure, so we'll receive data from one of these 2 contacts, that there's at least one that works. And now I'm going to test again this step. Okay, and then go here. And then here in the payload, we have Max name, the bio, and the location. And I guarantee you, this is not much. Like I can also, if people are interested, I can also leave these bits of code. It's not much to do and to know. It's knowing how to grab information from the record that enters in the automation. It's putting the URL of the webhook you created. And then it's writing this and making sure you insert the each data point that you had here. You insert these in your data part. Just using fetch, you can just copy this, then it's done.
Alex, just had a question from Mark around, do you prefer Integromat over Zapier for low code work?
Yeah. Yes, is that a question?
Yeah, I think yeah, some
So,
yeah, the why.
yeah, okay, got it. So actually, I don't mind. But my co-founder is fanatic of Integromat and doesn't want to hear about Zapier. So there must be a good reason for that. I think like it really doesn't matter as long as you can do what you want to achieve there. I'm pretty sure Zapier has webhooks. They have PostgreSQL. You can make a HTTP request with them. The only downside I see from Zapier, they have more apps, they have less depth, in my opinion. And so, especially you're trying to build stuff with no code, you wanna try to push the tools to the maximum. So if you have parity between Zapier and Integromat in terms of like both work with the tools you use, awesome. I would look further into what actions, operations each tool offers. 90% of the time, Integromat will offer more possibilities. And then you go for this one. And the second thing is it's more expensive, right? So they are market leader, and it will cost you more if you're on a budget and trying to indie hack a project. Maybe you don't want to spend $20 or $30 a month for something that Integromat offers you for $10. Then use the tool you feel more comfortable with. This is really that was an unfortunate omission in the tools in the toolbox. Cool. Any questions on webhooks? I'd be curious actually, do you find this hard? Would you be able, if I give you this, do you feel comfortable you reusing it?
Yeah, what do you
Tony is saying yes. Oh yeah.
Can we take a poll? That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, if I just have to copy and paste a script, that's where I'm at in low code. I haven't been able to like write it. I've been able to like change my field headings in Airtable.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's how I prefer my my coding at this point in time. I just change a word here and there from a thing I'm copying and pasting.
But like pretty much just that, like what you would need in this, what you would need to replace, like take your base, how are the fields called? Like change that, and then how do you want this here? This is the name you have in the webhook. This is how you call stuff. You can call it Tony as well. Like it's really how you name things. You have those different stats, but like you have literally you can replace stuff here. You can add as many fields. Yeah. The only thing is don't send it to my webhook, right? Otherwise we have some problem. Cool. All right, last case with like a bit more time. I really want to show you this one. Last case is enriching data. So I have been battling with CRMs and lead lists for quite a while. And there's no way around it. People don't like entering data manually in a basis also, nor should they. And so right now, if you are, I'm really talking to those who are using Airtable now, because this is like the use case, typical use case you have in there. If there's an API that can provide you the information you need on a specific record, just call the API. Never do some manual enrichment ever again. So I have an example here of like fake crypto portfolio. Don't panic, I'm not that rich yet. But where, like, imagine you have a crypto portfolio with positions. So you have like actually it's a lot of Bitcoin, a bit too much. Let's say I have like 0.2. There, better. A few Ethereum and Cardano, then a little bit more. Okay, so that's my portfolio. I would like to know on a daily basis how much is that worth. Problem is price change. Yeah, especially in crypto, can change significantly from one day to another. But there are lots of APIs that can provide me this information. And so one thing you can do is use APIs to enrich records. There are lots of cases for companies where we we find contacts, so we scrape contacts. That is first part, like find me people and find me contacts at MakerPad, people that are relevant, step one. And then step two is, well, find me their email. And then for email, I can use an API like Hunter or People or Lucia, which are enrichment APIs. And if they find them in the database, they can get the email. So the full step of finding those people is automated. And so in this case, what I created is in just an app. I'm just going to press a button. No, let me keep this closed. So press a button, and I think the important part is what's going to happen here. It loads error. All right. So it's going to clean up this table first. So I'm not doing anything. This is optional. It's just to show you that it's going to replace, because if the price has not moved yet. Now it's going to fetch APIs and look for the current price. It's a bit of time. Boom, done. Okay, so now let's look at the code we have to do it. 30 lines of code, not too bad. Probably much more, like still more advanced than the rest. So what I have here, this is my like, it's a free API I used. At least I'm on the free tier, where like I have those parameters that I have defined. Ticker and key. So the key is my API key, which I will change after this video. And the ticker is for is the only thing that needs to vary every time I make the API call. It's this thing here. So the first step, I'm going to do an API call with this parameter, the second with this one, until I'm done. And okay, so this we don't need. Sorry, it's actually less than 30, because this we don't need. And so the code is it's called a for loop, and a for loop is something that's going to like allow you to loop through all the elements that you have. And so I'm just, for every single record in this table, I am calling an API using their ticker in the parameter. And in the response, I may, like, if you look at I'm going to actually show you what one API call returns. And then we'll be almost done. If I run this, so here I can see the response from the API. I did it with BTC. And so the only like code part that you need to figure out is, like, whenever you work with an API, is going to return different things. And well, I can't really work with that. I can't push all of this in the. I need to insert this in the records in the field price. So there's a little bit of figuring out what do I want actually here. Actually, I just want the rate. So sometimes the solution is just writing something like result.rate. Then actually I have my price here. And so I really want to demystify that, like, when you're working with APIs, you start with this. You start with, oh my God, like, what do I need to do? Like, where is everything? And actually you write, okay, I want the time, I write dot time, I have my outcome. If I want something that's nested a bit further, I'm gonna write dot time dot updated on, like, it's accessing the value, the values you need from the API code you generated is actually it's something that's perfectly, you don't need to be a developer to do this. All right, and of course, like, it's the script is a bit more complicated than that, because we have to interact with Airtable, the Airtable base. So there's a lot of those things. They are actually specific to Airtable, but like listing the ones that we use frequently at the agency, we probably have like 5-6 functions that you need to know how to use them, and then you're good to go. Then you can do all the operations that you do manually in Airtable today, like updating the price or changing the status. You could just do it programmatically in Airtable, and I would like, if you're really starting from zero, in a month's time, by doing it a little bit of it every day, you can get already pretty far. And the last thing, and that will be my conclusion, this thing is super addictive. So if you start writing little pieces of code and they start working, and it could be very simple automation. Your first API call that updates a record in Airtable, it feels like magic. And then you're thinking more, okay, what am I going to automate next? What is the next API call that I can write? And then you build this muscle over time, and then without even discovering it, you know how to fetch APIs, trigger webhooks, and do everything that we saw in this workshop. All right. Questions, remarks.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, Alex, that was great. Maybe, yeah, just people come off mute and ask away. Prajat, yeah, I know you had a question. Maybe, yeah. Do you want to share that, or do you want me to just fire away?
Oh, right. Yeah. My question was mostly around like, so there is like that automation tab in Airtable, and like some people answered. So and then there's the scripting tag. With scripting, I can kind of bypass their measurement thing, right? I can call as many APIs as I want within the custom code. So is there like a hard limit to how many API calls you could do within your code?
Yes. Yes. Scripts have up to 30 seconds to execute. Things like, so for instance, in Airtable, if you have a script that generates a lot of records, you can do it also via API, and you hit the limits when you can see the operations. When we updated the price, it took maybe a second or two to update each record. And so if the script takes too long to update, then at some point it will stop. Like, you have a maximum of 30 seconds. Those are the limitations. There are workarounds. There are things we show in the course a bit more advanced, where, for instance, if you need to create 1,000 records in 10 seconds, I can show you how to do it. It's just using different functions, and you need to, it's more like, we wouldn't say engineering problem, because definitely not an engineering, but like this more an engineering approach to, well, you have a limit of 30 seconds, then I'm going to use this because it's faster, and I'm going to still bypass your limitation this way. Yeah. And the other thing is, you can chain, so in the automation that you have in Airtable, you can definitely chain as many scripts as you want. And so I had the use case for a client where they have a CRM, and all their leads, not CRM, like important companies and contacts are in there, and all their leads are in Airtable, because then they save money on this. And so the moment you have a new lead that arrives, the question is this lead already in the CRM? Is this person already in a list of do not contact, etc., etc.? And those are things that before were done by interns. Like, you have to check, you have to do VLOOKUPs. It's horrible. And instead, what we do is one API call on the first Airtable base. Do you find a match? No? Okay, good. Next API call on the second base. Do you find a match? You could chain as many as you want. Just the restriction is then you would need to split different scripts inside an automation. And I don't know the limit of the number of scripts executed by automation. Actually, I think we have like 4 or 5 in some automations, and that works just fine.
Okay, cool, awesome, makes sense. Also, is there like so I've not used automations yet, but so like you can chain scripts within the automation, but like, is it like just a single chain, or do you have like branching or looping, stuff like that?
What do you mean, like chaining, like having one outcome for a first script and then taking that outcome and continuing?
So, like for the example that you showed, like, so you were doing you were running a script for each of those of the tickers, right?
Yeah.
But that was just one script, or was it like different scripts?
No,
and
we
then
did two. We did two.
Okay.
We did two, and like in general, that's good practice because then, like when your automation fails in Airtable, they're gonna tell you, oh, this failed here. And when we started working with scripts, we started writing like scripts of 150 lines of code, which is super not convenient to find out where they have a problem, especially when you're not a developer or you don't have time to do this. So actually, have a script that does one thing, like, oh, you're the script that updates the price. Then if the script fails, then you know, like it's 20 lines of code that you have to debug. It's not 150 where I have to spend the afternoon finding where things might have gone wrong. So yeah, I would recommend you just split the scripts by and like one script for one purpose. Do not do multiple operations together. There's also a way to pass data from one script to another. So in an automation, you have those. It's called output variables. And you can say, let's say you have an outcome when you calculate a certain price, and then you want to use it in another script after. There is a way to pass data from one script to another. So there's absolutely no reason to cram everything into a script of like 5 meters.
makes sense. Thank you. That's cool.
Cool. Maybe time for one more question. Yeah, if anyone has got one before we close up. Nope, doesn't look like it. Cool. Just yeah, cool. I'm glad you've had some stuff demystified, Kelly. Cool. Yeah, that was immense. Yeah, I learned a lot. Thanks so much for your time, Alex. Is there any final words that you want to leave us on? Of course, we'll be sharing the workshop afterwards, so people can look back on it. But any final words you'd like to leave people on? And I'll be sure to share the link to your course as well.
Yeah, for sure. So no, I don't want to do like a promotion in general. That's fine. My only message is, and maybe I forgot to mention at the beginning, I am not a developer. I come from the business world, and you can learn this. Like you can really learn this by yourself. The outline, of course, our course helps, but like you can also start on those topics, learn a bit of HTML, see how far does it lead you in your understanding of things. HTML, CSS is dead easy. SQL, in an afternoon, you can already do cool stuff. JavaScript is a little bit more complicated, but it's also a bit more rewarding. I can guarantee you this is something that you won't regret investing time in.
Awesome. Cool.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Cool. We'll have amazing weeks, guys, and see you all on Twitter and elsewhere. Cool. Cheers. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.